Hello, my friends. As you can probably hear, my voice has said goodbye, so you'll just have to listen to what's left of it. And feel free to throw in a little donation for Candace. Okay, today we'll jump right into the situation at the front because it's gradually getting worse, and I want to start this update with the hottest directions right now, specifically the Kostiantynivka sector. It looks like we might soon see new changes along the front line here, and not for the better. Today, assaults are ongoing near Chasiv Yar, and the Russians are still trying to push toward the Shevchenko district. Fierce fighting is also taking place near Stupochki and Pretechene, with the Russian forces advancing toward Bila Hora, Deliyevka and Sherbinivka, and launching attacks on Yablonivka and Rusin Yar. In the Kostiantynivka direction, battles continue along the main defense line. First and foremost, this includes Yablonivka, which is now about 50% under Russian control. Russian forces have also moved toward the outskirts of Alexandro-Kalinove, another highly important village. If Russia manages to fully capture both Yablonivka and Alexandro-Kalinove, they'll be able to approach Kostiantynivka within 4 kilometers with a 6-kilometer wide front. While this alone wouldn't be enough to fully encircle the city from the south, it makes it absolutely critical to hold the flanks. I believe the Russians will initially try to follow a Pokrovsk scenario, aiming to encircle the city from the south and southwest. And yesterday, the Russians started claiming they had made progress near Alexandro Kalinove. The Russian army managed to advance into new fortifications northwest of Yablonivka. In addition, Russian forces took a large part of Alexandro Kalinove and drove the Ukrainian army from the east bank of the Kalinivka river. However, they are still having problems consolidating in that locality. As we can see, they're running into issues. They can't fully hold the area because Ukraine's armed forces are striking them hard with FPV drones. Still, the gray zone continues to expand, and due to wave style meat assaults, it's probably just a matter of time before they manage to establish themselves there. The situation is definitely not developing in our favor here. That said, it's important to note Russia hasn't had any major breakthroughs so far, and the Ukrainian army is successfully repelling most attacks. In the Pokrovsk direction, activity is even more intense. Today marks the second day of discussions around the town of Rodinsky, which could become a key stronghold for the defense of Pokrovsk. If Russian forces break through and manage to encircle that area, the Ukrainian forces might be forced to retreat from both Pokrovsk and Myrnograd. And here, the situation is pretty clear. Once the Russians expand their control around the village of Koptive, they'll likely aim to advance directly toward Rodinsky. So things are looking very bad here. Today, Russian forces are doing everything they can to launch this breakthrough, shelling all surrounding villages and starting periodic assaults. At the same time, fighting hasn't stopped near Malinivka, and Russian troops are pushing toward Novoekonomichne. This clearly shows their goal of expanding the controlled territory to prevent Ukraine from launching counterattacks that might cut off their lines. There are also ongoing assaults on Myrolubivka and Promeny village, with Russian troops pushing toward the outskirts of Myrnograd, attacking Lysivka, Dachinske, and advancing near Zvirove and Udachne. So far, there haven't been any changes in the past 24 hours, and the Ukrainian side is doing everything it can to hold the line despite being heavily outnumbered in this direction. In the Novopavlivka direction, Russian troops are pushing toward Novopavlivka village and trying to entrench themselves in the surrounding fields. The gray zone has already expanded and now reaches into Dnipropetrovsk region, though the Ukrainian forces are still managing to hit them hard and push them back. At the same time, assaults on Horikhove continue with active fighting near the outskirts of Oleksiivka. The Russians are attacking Zeleny Kut and advancing toward the village of Myrne. Yesterday, Russian sources even claim they captured the village of Perebudova and showed their flag there. Earlier, they had already said they took full control of Komar village. The Ukrainian side, however, is currently only confirming a partial loss of Komar. So we are waiting for updated maps to verify the real situation. In any case, the situation remains difficult, and so far it hasn't been possible to fully stop the Russian advance. In the Velyka Novosilka direction, Russian forces are storming the village of Shevchenko and are partially trying to establish a foothold there. So the situation in this area remains tense, and there are also ongoing fighting for Vilna Pole, and Russian troops have broken through in the area around Zelene Pole. However, there have been no new changes along the front line so far. According to Russian sources, Ukrainian forces are doing everything they can to destroy them in this area, allegedly because this territory is strategically important for Ukraine due to its natural resources. Why such fierce resistance for a modest little village in the far west of the so-called DNR, just 2 kilometers from the Dnipropetrovsk region? The explanation is simple. Near this village, which is now considered part of the Russian Federation, there are promising lithium ore deposits. This is one of several deposits that the so-called buffer zone Narco-Führer allegedly sold to Trump as part of rare earth metals deal. In total, 4 lithium deposits have been confirmed in Ukraine. One of them, Kruta Balka in Zaporizhia, was already returned to Russia during the war. The Shevchenkinsky deposit is currently in progress. Next up, 2 deposits in Kirovograd region, Plohivske and the Dobraya site. In short, the Russians have still been unable to capture even the village of Shevchenko, despite fighting for it for weeks. And yet, they are dreaming of seize all of Kirovograd region. Friends, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. In the Gulay Pole direction, Russian forces continue shelling, but no new offensive actions have been recorded. The front line here remains unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Zaporizhia direction, Russian forces are assaulting Novoandriivka and Kamyansk and continue conducting shelling. However, the front line here remains stable, with Ukrainian forces successfully repelling all attacks. In the Kherson direction, attacks continue near the Antonivsky Bridge, and the right bank remains under constant shelling. Russian forces are using FPV drones to monitor all movement across Kherson, targeting and destroying any equipment they detect. Now, let's move to the Siversk direction. Here, Russian forces are assaulting Serebryanka, attempting breakthroughs near Grigorivka and Verkhnyokamensky. However, the Ukrainian forces are pushing them back right on the outskirts of Serebryanka, making the situation difficult for the Russians. After capturing Grigorivka, Russian troops are trying to advance along the forest line to later launch assaults further south directly towards Siversk. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian forces continue to release footage showing how they are hitting Russian forces hard at the edges of Serebryanka. So, overall, the situation here remains challenging. In the Liman direction, Russian forces are attacking Zarychne and Yampolivka, trying to break through near Kolodezi and storming Zelena Dolina, Karpivka, Novy Mir, and Olhivka, pushing toward Drushilubivka. Activity remains extremely high, but for now, they haven't made any gains, and the front line hasn't changed in the past 24 hours. In the Borova direction, Russian forces continue the assaults in the area of Boguslavka, and attacks on Chernyshina have resumed. However, no breakthroughs have occurred, and the front line remains unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian troops are storming Holubivka, while no new attacks have been recorded near the village of Myrne. The Ukrainian side hasn't confirmed any occupation of the village by Russian forces. In the Dvorichna direction, Russian forces are attempting breakthroughs in the areas of Fygolivka, Krasnopershe, and Kamyanka. They're trying to push beyond the settlements, but for now, the Ukrainian forces are repelling all attacks, and there have been no changes to the front line. In the Kharkiv direction, Russian troops are advancing toward the settlement of Liptsi and shelling the southern part of Hliboke, which is already largely within the gray zone. However, they haven't been able to push further, and Ukrainian forces continue to hold their defensive positions without retreating. In Vovchansk, fighting continues, but the front line remains unchanged. In the Sumy direction. According to preliminary information, Ukrainian forces conducted a counterattack on the village of Andriivka and managed to advance. However, the Ukrainian side hasn't yet officially confirmed this success, and it appears that the operation is being kept under wraps. That said, Russian sources are already openly claiming that the Ukrainians have liberated Andriivka. So, for now, we are waiting to see how events unfold. What's clear is that the Ukrainian General Staff has deployed reserves to this area in an effort to push Russian forces farther away from the city of Sumy. Additionally, a new video has surfaced online showing a Russian strike on a Ukrainian training ground in the Mykolaiv region. The footage shows Russian drones flying freely over the site, filming the attack and collecting strike footage. Meanwhile, the war between Israel and Iran continues, and following the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, the Iranian parliament has supported the idea of closing the Strait of Hormuz. The decision is not final yet. The final word lies with Iran's National Security Council, but the signal is loud and clear. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical oil and gas transit routes in the world. About 20% of global oil and a significant portion of liquefied gas from Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia pass through it. If the strait is blocked, it could trigger a global energy shock and provoke a new wave of conflict in the Middle East. I would advise the Chinese government in Beijing to reach out because they heavily rely on the Strait of Hormuz for oil. If Iran goes through with this, it would be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them. We have response options, but so do other countries, and they need to seriously consider them. It would hit other economies much harder than ours. This would be a massive escalation that deserves a response, not just from us, but from others as well. We had 3 targets. We hit those 3 targets successfully with decisive force. That was the core of the mission, and we achieved it, said Marco Rubio. And he also said that they're still ready to talk with Iran if Iran is ready for a diplomatic resolution of the issue.
What happens next will now depend on what Iran chooses to do next. If they choose the path of diplomacy, we're ready. We can do a deal that's good for them, the Iranian people, and good for the world. Yeah. If they choose another route, then there'll be consequences for that.
Meanwhile, Russia and China have taken a hard stance against the US, effectively signaling that World War III is beginning. They've opened Pandora's box. Russia and China strongly opposed the US at the UN Security Council over strikes against Iran. Beijing stated that the Americans have damaged their own reputation with strikes against the Islamic Republic and have caused harm to it. Russian Representative Nebenzia condemned the US's irresponsible, dangerous, and provocative actions. To maintain their global dominance, the US is willing to break any international law, Nebenzia emphasized. Nobody gave the US permission to act like this, he added. The US opened Pandora's box, and it's unclear what consequences this might bring. So, effectively, China, Iran, and Russia, excluding Belarus, the Houthis, and other countries that support Iran and Russia, have basically taken a path of war against the US and NATO countries. That's probably why Poland has started actively preparing for war today. Poland is preparing for a Russian invasion. The country is already planning the evacuation of artworks in case of a Russian attack. Overall, the war is escalating worldwide. Friends, please be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me. So please, excuse me. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.